AI4Belgium. Next slide. We have many different activities at the policy recommendation level. We support the regional initiative. We have many webinars, but in this context, I will stress the role of the AI Ethics and Law Working Group in the consultation of all the stakeholders within Belgium regarding the international consultation from the European Commission, the Council of Europe, OECD, or UNESCO, for example, on the white paper and on the ethics guidelines. Next slide. Maybe it's important to stress that in our structure, we have several verticals and several transversal groups, and the project we will present today is really at the cross of all these working groups. We will begin with AI for Health, AI for Gov, and Future of Work, crossing with ethics and law. So we will focus on this domain to begin the projects of the AI ethics assessment tool. Next slide. So we are completely involved in the European coordinated plan on AI. And this project is also, for the moment, retaining all the attention of all the actors through Europe. So Nathalie, you will maybe say a word of Barry O'Sullivan's interest in the project we will present today. Next slide. So yes, tomorrow we will have also our General Assembly. It's just to show here all the people that are involved in the management of the working groups. Next slide. And now I will introduce Mathieu Michel. Mathieu Michel, you are the Secretary of State for Digitalization, simplification of the administration, protection of the privacy, and you are deputy to the Prime Minister. Before, during 8 years, you were president of the Collège Provincial du Brabant Wallon. You were responsible, among others, of the digitalization aspect. And you have launched a new place of working project that was a big success in Wallonia. In terms of digital, you have worked much for the digitalization of the different parts of the Walloon Brabant with 27 communes, and you help them become the real smart cities. It's also your aim to digitalize more the schools, and you were one of the most important person in the digitalization of the schools. Mr. the Secretary of State, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nathanael. Thank you for this presentation. And I try to be as short as you were to let the place to the next speakers. I'm really glad to be here with you today. And I'm so proud to be the witness of all that energy concerned by the development of AI through AI for Belgium that you mentioned. This week is really important because it gives us the opportunity to expose so much diversity in the challenges we are facing to become a smart nation. You talked about smart city. My job is now to make us a smart nation. Among them, I believe that one of the greatest will consists in building trust in innovation and building trust in AI. Like I said in my opening speech on Monday, mankind has always found solutions in building a better world for everyone. And this one was made possible through innovation and creativity. In fact, innovation and creativity, that is made through our humanity. And AI is one of the many innovations that offers so much opportunities. But we have to be honest. There is also some risks. We all know that. Innovation will always be confronted to human creativity, human perception, human trust, but also human responsibility. I want to be honest with you. I'm not an AI expert, but I do politics since more than 20 years. And I know that creativity, perception, trust, and responsibility are the key of many progress for mankind. Technology is not an end. It's a tool to build a better world for everyone. Better healthcare, better mobility, better education. The purpose of technology is to make humans feel better. And that is a human responsibility to manage technology, innovation, and AI in that way. I feel I was not an expert, but I do know that AI is based on data and algorithm, right? I know it's a little bit more complicated, but even deep learning comes from the initial will of human being with his perception, feelings, philosophy, ethical point of view, and once again, it's humanity. And that is the point. We, as human beings, must ensure control and transparency, but mostly we must guarantee that innovation, ethics, and laws are deeply connected together. The society itself must embrace the debate. It cannot be only an initiated discussion, only for experts. The society must also take its place in building a trustworthy AI. A lot have been already done at the European level about ethical AI. EU is working on a regulation destined to face the ethical risks in AI. A proposition will come in the coming weeks and should be adopted in the coming months or years. Belgium, you have to know that, wants to be an actor of the debate in ethical regulation. And at this point, my reflection is based on two axes. First one are the European values. That is the European Declaration of Human Rights, but the values are really important. Second one, that's the fact of the trustworthy tools. And I see there the algorithms and the data protection. The algorithm, in fact, the way the algorithms are built around transparency, acceptability, explainability, those are really important features. But also data protection, and for example, the GDPR, but also all the regulation that must come. And why not? Why not? One day I could maybe also dream about an European algorithm agency which could certify trusted algorithm. But let's come back to reality. In the meantime, in Belgium, we want to encourage our organization, both private and public, to act so responsibly as much as possible. We want to let innovation and ethics go hand in hand so that everyone can enjoy it. In order to help organizations in Belgium, whether they are public or private actors, a project has been launched to translate the ethical guidelines developed at European level in 3 areas where we are already seeing problems emerging in Belgium: health, human resources, and public sector. I will let Nathalie Smoura tell you more about this project, and would like to thank her for the amazing job she has already done in building a more trustworthy AI. By developing a user-friendly tool that can help organizations to be more aware and ethical when dealing with their AI systems, we can both prepare them for future regulation and be ahead of the curve in Belgium. But we can also increase citizens' confidence in this technology. This trust is essential to make AI a success. And this success will build Belgium as a smart nation. And a smart nation, it is a territory that is able to mobilize itself for its citizens and its businesses around a common vision towards the future with efficiency and more, with excellency. It's also a territory that develops its ambition all around the world. I will myself fully support with all my work and all my heart each energy from Belgium, because that is a smart nation that we are building together. I thank you, and I'm really pleased to be with you today.
Thank you very much, Mathieu, Michel. I will now introduce the two working group leads of AI ethics and law. So Nathalie, you are a researcher at KU Leuven. You examine the legal and ethical question around artificial intelligence and other technologies. You focus particularly on the impact on AI on human rights and societal value. You regularly advise international organizations on AI-related policy matters. You were involved in the high-level expert group as the coordinator. You are now independent expert for the Comité ad hoc for Artificial Intelligence of the Council of Europe and member of the OECD network of experts on AI, One AI. You are a qualified attorney at the New York Bar, and previously you worked as a lawyer in an international firm. You hold also degrees in law and philosophy from the KU Leuven and from the University of Chicago of Law. Jelle, you are the co-lead of this working group, and you are the ICT standardization expert at Agoria. You mainly focus around standardization and regulation for technologies like artificial intelligence, and within AI4Belgium, you as the co-lead, as I said. Nathalie, Jelle, I let you the floor.
Thank you very much, Nathanael. So let me pull up my slides. And Jelle and I will give a presentation and just explain why we are actually here today, what the purpose is, how the guidelines started on European level, and what we want to do with them today. So I think by now you should be able to see my slides. If you don't, then just give me a sign. Otherwise, I'm assuming all is fine. So why are we here?
Sorry, Nathalie, you need to go in full screen still, I think.
I'm not on full screen. Like this, okay? No?
Yet.
Then let me try again. I always like to make the joke when these things happen that AI is certainly not taking over the world yet, if we cannot even have a basic slideshow presentation started. So let me see, I need to pull it up again. But maybe in the meantime, I can already just have a first go without the slides. So basically, the idea is that everyone today knows that there are quite some ethical risks associated with the development, the use and the design of AI. And our idea is to tackle those risks. We're of course not the only ones. Already at European level and many other levels, some action has been taken to tackle that. But we want to take this work forward and see what we can do specifically to help the Belgian ecosystem to deal with these risks. So if everything goes well, this time you should be able to see my slides.
There we are.
Excellent, thank you very much. And so let me just first start with the raison d'être of AI4Belgium's working group on ethics and law, which indeed, as Nathanael said, I'm co-leading together with Jelle, who is always so kind to help me. It all started with AI4Belgium recommendations. And one of these recommendations was that trust is the cornerstone of any transformation. Basically, we need an up-to-date and robust legal framework, ethical principles, and of course, transparency is one of that. One of the things we need to take into account. So this working group was created within the AI4Belgium. And next to Jelle and myself, we also have a board consisting of Rob Heijmans, Yves Poulet, and Karl Morg, who are also, most of them are also here today, but all of them are definitely involved also in this project. And the purpose of this working group is basically to inform the Belgian AI ecosystem of all the developments ongoing on ethics and law in Belgium, but also on European and international level. But besides just informing, the idea is also to act. So with this working group, we've already taken some actions to ensure that the ecosystem can tackle the ethical and legal challenges, and also to make sure that our vision, the vision of the Belgian ecosystem, is heard on European and international level through public consultations, etc., by giving feedback collectively. Now, moving on to these ethics guidelines, right? Because as the State Secretary already mentioned, at European level, ethics guidelines were developed. They take a human-centric approach. I'm sure you all already heard of the word human-centric AI, with the idea that AI is a means, it's a tool. It's not an end in itself, but it's a tool that is meant to help society, individuals, and create benefits for them. Trustworthy AI was then coined as a sort of foundational ambition, and it has three components, namely AI should be lawful, because a lot of laws already exist that apply to AI today. Think, for instance, of the GDPR, right? So these laws need to be respected. AI needs to be ethical, so in line with ethical principles, and it needs to be robust. And robust, there we also talk about technically robust, right? So it shouldn't be able to be hacked, there should be no data leaks, so security, etc. The guidelines are built on a fundamental rights approach. That's very important. They're grounded in fundamental rights, and they're meant to complement existing laws or inspire updates in the law. So it was never stated that mere non-binding guidelines are enough. Right? For sure, we also need legislation, and we need to update current legislation. However, these guidelines are already a very useful starting point and can complement that legislation. These guidelines were horizontal in scope. So they did not go into AI that is only being used in HR, for instance, or only being used in healthcare. However, in the guidelines, and I took the quote because I think it's important to stress this, it was already mentioned that different situations or different contexts raise different challenges. And that if we do a sort of ethical risks mapping of AI, we need to take these context specificities into account, right? I always give the example, an AI system that recommends you a song that ultimately you don't really like, and so it makes an error there. It's not the same like an AI system that makes an error in a medical diagnosis that it gives you, right? So context matters, and the ethical challenges vary across contexts. So the idea was always that the implementation of these guidelines must be adapted to the particular AI application. And that is also where the idea of this project started. So you see here the 7 ethical requirements for trustworthy AI that were mentioned in the guidelines that were developed at EU level. And I'll just very quickly go through them. I hope all of you are already familiar with them somehow, and I don't have a lot of time. But just to refresh everyone's minds about it, first of all, human agency and oversight. We need to make sure that we made some sort of impact assessment on human rights of the AI system. And again, not all AI systems will have an equal or even an impact on human rights, right? This depends. User autonomy needs to be central. We need to make sure there is no deception or manipulation. We need to ensure there is some level of human control. Depending on the risk level, this might be more or less control, and testing and governance mechanisms. Then the second requirement is technical robustness and safety. So as I already said, resilience to attacks, making sure there's a fallback plan in case something goes wrong. The system needs to be accurate, reliable, and the results need to be reproducible. And of course, many of these aspects count for all IT systems, not only specifically for AI systems, but with AI, there are some increased risks. Privacy and data governance then. Privacy, I think everyone is quite familiar with. But also data governance is important. And that goes beyond data protection. Data governance also means making sure that your data is qualitative, that you have data integrity taken into account, and that you govern who has access to which data. Then transparency, so making sure that your system is traceable to the extent possible, that it is explainable, especially if there is an impact on individuals, and that you communicate about the AI system, basically communicating about what are the limitations of the system, what are the capacities, so that users actually are aware of what the system can and cannot do and don't have any wrong expectations. But also communicating that you're using an AI system, because sometimes it might not be clear for people and they should not be misled into that. Then diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness. I think this is also a problem that has come a lot in the news recently. The idea that AI can have certain biases. And we just had the previous event of the Belgian AI Week was a panel that delved into the issue of bias and discrimination. So this is something that needs to be taken into account. And stakeholder participation can help to counter that risk. Societal and environmental well-being. So we know that AI can also have quite some impact on the environment because of the energy that is being used with data centers. It can have a social impact in our human interaction and on society and democracy more generally. And then last but not least, accountability, right? Making sure that whomever develops or deploys the AI system is accountable, especially when things go wrong. And to have that accountability, being able to audit the AI system is a great help, making sure you look into potential negative impact, you address them, you report them, and having mechanisms for redress. So all of these requirements were then put also into an assessment list that operationalizes these requirements. And this assessment list is really the core of this project. That is why I want to emphasize it. So for each of these 7 requirements that I just mentioned, the assessment list lists practical questions, right? And these questions of this assessment list were then tested. There was feedback that was collected through a piloting process that was organized by the high-level expert group and the European Commission. And so they asked basically feedback from organizations, public and private. What do you think of this list? How can it be improved? So there was an online survey, interviews, the European AI Alliance also played a role in there. So this feedback was gathered, and then a revised version of this assessment list was published in July last year. And the team of Barry O'Sullivan already developed a sort of online tool in which these questions were then put. And in fact, this also served as feedback for the white paper on AI, which is kind of blueprint for an AI regulation. Now, let me just give you some examples very briefly of what this assessment list looked like. So for instance, under the point technical robustness and safety, you had the area of accuracy. So these are the questions that are being asked in this assessment list. For example, did you put in place measures to ensure that the data is up to date, that it is of high quality? Did you put in place a series of steps to monitor and document the accuracy of the AI system? So you see, it's a list of questions that is meant to help developers reflect on whether they took the right steps to minimize the ethical risks of AI. I'm showing you one more example. So for the avoidance of unfair bias, did you establish a strategy or procedures to avoid creating or reinforcing bias in the system? And then, did you test for specific target groups? Did you research and use available tools? Because there are already some tools out there. Did you put in place education and awareness initiatives? So all these questions are meant to help reflect people on these issues. And now I give it over to Jelle.
Thank you, Nathalie, for the introduction. So what I'll try to do is I'll give you a bit of an overview of first, what is the end result of this Trustworthy AI assessment list. And as Nathalie mentioned, it was published into an online tool. And the main goal for this tool is to help developers and deployers of artificial intelligence systems to, in a very practical way, implement Trustworthy AI. So what we did with this tool, because it had to be practical, we did a practical test. We asked some companies to go through it. We went through it ourselves to see how can this now bring trustworthy artificial intelligence towards our companies and other organizations. So in general, we got some feedback And it's a very good starting point. There are some positive points to this, this online assessment list, but there are also some improvement points. And in the next 5 minutes, I will go over a bit of this online tool to give you a bit of an image. So here you can have the landing page. Oh, Nathalie, you can go back in presenter mode, please. Next slide. And first, of course, you click how to complete Altai. And the feedback that we got there is that it takes around 2 to 3 hours. And if you look there, you need to have a multidisciplinary team of people to complete it. Basically, you will need around 6 people all over your organization. And in total, it will take 2 to 3 hours, which already seems maybe long, but we think it's essential because AI ethics is not something that one person can do or implement. AI ethics is something that you really need to think about over your whole organization, and you really need to take the time to fill this in. Next slide, please. Then you have the possibility to create a specific project. So I'll go over the process here. If you create a project, then you get a list of questions. And these are the questions which are asked at the end of the ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI, but then formulated into an online tool. It will look like this, and you will have a question, you will have a possibility to answer. And this is the flow of the whole list. Next slide, please. Something which we think is very positive. If you look towards these questions, you can see that in blue, there are links highlighted. Artificial intelligence generally at the technical level, but also ethics is something which is often quite difficult. If you're not a domain expert, maybe some terminology is difficult to understand. So what was included in this online assessment list is definitions and explanations on certain terms, which can really help the people who are developing and deploying AI to really understand what is meant by a certain question. So this is quite a positive point. Next slide, please. But although there are definitions and explanations, sometimes they're very high level. And here you can see the definition which is used for artificial intelligence. It's a very long text and it can be daunting a bit. Often these long definitions in practice, they create maybe more confusion than they create clarity. So this is maybe an improvement point according to us. Another thing which we think can improve is the follow-up. For example, you here have a question, could the AI system affect human autonomy? If you would say yes, okay, it's just yes. There is no real possibility as of now to have a solution maybe. If you would have a sort of problematic situation somewhere, there is no tools given, no mitigation mechanisms. So this is really something we think can be added to this tool to really make it very practical and to create some more value and to make it as a tool which can be used in practice by companies and organizations. When to use it is also a difficult one because the list as of now, it's formulated a bit that you fill it in once and then you get an overview. But working correctly on trustworthy AI is something you do over the whole life cycle of a product or of a system. So it's important that there may be a separation. Which questions do you answer when? Very specifically here, you can see the first question is, when have the humans been given specific training how to exercise oversight? This is typically a question which you will answer quite late in the development, maybe when you've put it already in production. And then the question that follows it, did you establish any detection and response mechanisms? This is something you would do at a very early stage of the project. So this is something to consider. Should this list be a one-time use or should it be used over the life cycle of the system or the product? And if so, how to do it? Another thing is how deep do we have to go? For example, here, the question is, does your AI system align with relevant standards, such as ISO standards? There are a lot of standards existing, but often it's quite difficult to find your way in it. So how deep should we go? Should we add all these standards or should we just add some references? This is a question we need to ask ourselves as well. Now, if you fill on all the questions, you've taken the time to do it in detail with a multidisciplinary team, you get an end result. And this is something we think is very positive. And here you can see a basic spider diagram, which will give you an overview and a certain score connected to each of the 7 requirements which are put forward. As this is not it's not closed. Can you go one back, Nathalie? Sorry. it's not really a concisive result, but it really shows on which point you can improve. So this will create quite a visual image for an AI system and give you an idea what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses, and then you can work on improving those weaknesses. Next slide. And then the final point, which is maybe the most interesting, next to the spider diagram, you will get for all the types of requirements some recommendations. And this is really, I think, a tool which we can also use. If you filled in the list, you will get at the end some clear recommendations on what you can now do to improve maybe certain points. I think we have a lot of knowledge available. Specifically, the Knowledge Center Data and Society already has a lot of tools which we can then implement as well to this list to really give the companies and organizations using it more background and more information to really practically implement trustworthy AI. Next slide. So maybe to define our goal, and we'll go in a bit more deep, this assessment list and specifically this online tool has positive points and it has improvement points. What we want to do is improve it. We want to continue on the work that's being done or that has been done already and really refine this list into something which is usable in practice. And what we feel is the best approach is going in a sectoral way. We have defined already 3 sectors where we have, let's say, maybe a high ethical impact and in which we think this tool can really be an added value for companies developing and deploying AI to do it in a trustworthy way. Natalie, I give it back to you for the next steps.
Thank you, Jelle. So indeed, the idea is to start with 3 sectors. We chose these sectors because, well, we need to start somewhere and there are already some concrete risks there. And as I mentioned, also the high-level expert group, right, has already said that we need to start tailoring this more general list to specific applications and contexts. So here's the project's timeline. Basically today, we are at number 1, right? We're kicking off this project and the idea is to already gather stakeholders interested in this project that can give input. And you see listed here, public services, HR and health. The next step after this plenary session, and by the way, in this session, we will already have some breakout sessions to brainstorm about each of these 3 sectors, but we'll get to that later. So the next steps will be then the organization of workshops. For each of the 3 sectors, we're going to organize workshops where we can really dive in depth with domain experts into the different questions of the assessment list and where they need to be tailored, adapted to the specific AI applications in those sectors. Now, these workshops, there's always a limited number of people that can attend workshops, but we do want to have input from all stakeholders. So in any case, we will also ensure that we launch a survey after these workshops have taken place. So after we have a sort of revision of what is needed to tailor the assessment list, we will organize a survey that is open to everyone to gather input from all stakeholders. And then we will take that to another plenary session. So we will organize one just like today to have a discussion on the result and to see, does this go into the right direction? Are we fine there? And then on that basis, wireframes will be developed for an online tool and the tool itself will be developed. The idea of the tool is then to really take the tool that already exists that Barry's team has worked on, that Jelle explained, but just make it even more user-friendly and then tailor to the specific sectors. And in fact, Barry already said that his team might be able to help us as well, which would be great. Before we dive into these breakout sessions as well, I just want to give a few caveats about the project. Namely, first of all, the idea here is not to create a sort of ticking the box exercise, nor is this about giving legal advice, right? It's a self-assessment tool about ethical principles, but it doesn't mean if you go through the list of those tools that you're fine legally speaking, for instance. That's important to mention. The idea is to help organizations improve their processes. And we find it very important as well that all stakeholders are involved. So we will make sure that in each of the sectors, so public sector, healthcare, and HR, that we will have a diversity of people represented in the workshops and in the survey afterwards. So I've listed all the stakeholders here. This is really important. And so through the survey as well, we can make sure that everyone can have their say. Now, introduction to the team. So these three people you've already seen, you know who we are, but I want to introduce you also to other people because as Nathanael mentioned in the very beginning, even though this project started within the working group of ethics and law, it's actually a transversal project because we also have AI4Belgium domain leads of these sectors involved. We have Christine Kopers, who is leading the AI in government area. We have Laurent Ledoux, who is leading the group on the future of work. And we have Giovanni Briganti, who is leading the AI for Health working group. So all these people are already very engaged in AI4Belgium. They're already leading these domain working groups, and they will help to develop the tools specifically for their domains. And there are a few other people that you should also know of. Rob Heijman, Karel and Yves Poulet, Karl-Maria Moch, and they are part of the board of the working group Ethics and Law. So they're also involved in this project. Maybe just a caveat there as well. This board is right now quite masculine, but this will be changed quite soon, especially we just had a panel on inclusive AI. So this board will also be extended with some more female faces soon. But the three gentlemen over there are already very qualitative and full of talent to help us get this project through. And then the final introductions that I'd like to do before we kick off is the HUMIX team. So in fact, we've engaged a team of consultants to help bring this project to a good end. They're actually taking this project from A to Z. We have Mieke van Giels, who will be responsible for the development of the health-oriented tool. Tommy de Kimpe, who will be responsible for HR. And then we have Lonneke Spinoff, who will be taking you to the Gov sector. So what I will now do is leave the floor to them because they will explain what the next steps are concretely for this plenary session. And I don't know who of the HUMIX team will take the floor, but the floor is yours.
Yes, I will do so. Thank you, Nathalie, for introducing us. I will explain how the breakout sessions work. So in a while, we will be moving, we will be splitting up in 3 breakout rooms. So we have HR, health, and public services. We will record these sessions. So they will be recorded for internal use only. It will not be published publicly. It's very important. But if you prefer not to be recorded, please turn off your video. You can go on mute and share your opinion via the room chat if you want to. But keep that in mind. And before I go to the last point on this slide, as it's technically not possible to live stream the breakouts, we will have to finish our live stream here. And I would like to thank all people who participated in the live stream for their interest and welcome them to a future session. Now, how will we be going to the breakouts? To go to the breakout, you have to click on the little icon in the Zoom menu bar. So at the bottom of the screen, you see this 4 squares. And when you click on it, you can enter and choose which breakout room you want to visit. So please do so, and then we'll see you in one of our breakouts.
Mieke, I don't see how to go to the breakout session.
Yes, same here. With my Zoom, it's also not...
yes, me too.
Yeah, so no.
Now there's the icon.
I see participant, chat, share screen, record, and reaction, but I don't have this for the breakout rooms.
Yeah, exactly. I see that's a problem for a lot of people. Yeah. No.
Mika, we cannot hear you.
Oh, sorry. No, we're figuring out what's going wrong. Normally, we should be able to go to the breakouts via this icon at the bottom, but it doesn't work. I'm trying to find out how we can manage this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mika, will you be assigning us then to different breakouts if we don't manage to get there ourselves?